welcome to Beyond Sunday, where we are going to be keeping it real with faith and life because, hey, as y'all know, life be lifing. And we're actually doing this as we always do with Pastor Thomas. Would you prefer pastor or doctor? Which one do you prefer?
Pastor's fine.
Pastor, okay, all right. Well, we're going to be doing it with Pastor Thomas, and today we're actually talking about idols. So we're actually going to jump into it. We're not going to waste any time. So I actually took the time to look up the definition of an idol. It says an image or representation of God used as an object of worship. And then another definition says a person or thing that is greatly admired, loved, or revered. Does that align somewhere with what the Bible says an idol is?
I mean, yeah, I think so. I think that's a pretty good definition. The key to that is what is the object of worship? And if that object of worship is anything other than God, then that becomes an idol. And that object doesn't have to necessarily be a physical thing. It could be a set of beliefs. It could be a set of ideas. It could be, politics. It could be social media. It could be our image. It could be our comfort. So it's not just a physical thing.
No, so if I greatly admire someone, why is that seen or why is that looked at as an idol or a negative or in that space, right? Like if I greatly admire my father, does that mean he's an idol to me?
No, I don't think admiration means that you're struggling with idolatry. I think when that thing takes the place of God, like you begin to give reverence and awe and worship to that particular thing or person, then that's when it takes the place of God. Anything that unseats God from the throne of your life is an idol.
So what is the fine line of that? Because I think that could be a slippery slope, right? So like, obviously, most people say you wake up in the morning and you want to give reverence to God at that time. A lot of people wake up in the morning and they look at their cell phone. Does that make the cell phone an idol?
I think using your example, cell phone becomes an idol when it replaces who God is, when it becomes the place where we seek all of our help, we seek all of our guidance, we seek our comfort, we seek a place to be understood, to be accepted, versus seeking God for those things. So a phone ideally is a tool, and that's what it should be used at. But the moment that it takes center stage of our lives and it becomes the most important thing, the object of our worship, then it is replacing God. It then becomes an idol.
Okay, so we're staying on this cell phone for a second. So I have a social media page. I make money on my page. I want to check my money in the morning to make sure that my account is good, and I'm making money in my social media page. Have I now made my money and my social media page an idol? Because when I wake up, that's what I'm gonna check first.
No, it's not the act of what you put first in your order of things in terms of the day. It's really about what you prioritize in your life. So let's use your example of social media. So if my worth, my identity, if my value comes from my social media interactions and from my page, if I'm seeking to get acceptance and validation from that, if I'm seeking to be able to steer my life in a specific direction, if I have reverence and awe for social media technology, those are things that would begin to align the fact that this has become an idol in my life.
So basically, all of these social media posts that I generally see are lying to me then in a way, because a lot of people will come on social media and they'll be like, if you get up in the morning and you not giving reverence to God first before you check your phone, then your phone is an idol. So basically that's wrong.
I could say that it is because I could use a different analogy. If I wake up in the first thing in the morning and the first thing I do is get a drink of water or use the bathroom, does that mean my body is an idol?
That's a good one.
So I think, again, it becomes what we prioritize and what the object of our attention and worship is. Not just our attention, but what our real worship is. Like awe and reverence. Do we hold social media in that particular way? Is it a good idea to wake up and not focus on God? The whole idea, I think, in that statement really is whatever we set our minds to when we first wake up is really the thing that should be guiding us through the day. That doesn't necessarily mean that your phone is an idol. It may mean that you are struggling with some issues with being connected to your phone or overly connected, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an idol.
Okay. All right. So what are some common modern day idols?
I think common idols that we see nowadays are things like our career, our children, our status, our financial status, our career status, our status in society, our social status. Our comfort can be an idol where we really are very protective and revere and worship at kind of the throne of comfort. Politics we see now, political identities and parties, self-individual identities and ideologies that can take the place of God in our life.
So you hit on two things that I actually want to bring, because you said our kids can
Yes.
be. How can your kids be idols? Because I think, again, that's one of those slippery slope kind of things, right? You, as a parent, your job is to oversee
Sure.
them and to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. How can kids become idols?
They become idols if you tie your entire identity, value, and self-worth to your children and you put them in a position where everything that you do is based solely upon what your children want, not necessarily what they need, but what your children want, and moving your children forward, and doing things for your children at the exclusion of God, then that's when your children themselves become idols. Sometimes we struggle with the difference between providing and taking care of our children, and then at some point going beyond just providing and taking care of them. And we enter into some other areas where, okay, I can potentially be idolizing my children or idolizing parenthood.
So is that kind of like when kids are being spoiled then? Can you put those two things in the same vein, or they're different?
I think a good example of what I think about when I think about the idolization is a parent can begin to do things to remove every possible consequence for their child, right? So they begin to blunt all of the natural consequences of life. So if I tell my child, hey, be careful walking around the coffee table, you might potentially bump your head, right? So then, okay, well, now I want to remove that obstacle completely. So I'm removing everything from their lives. And I am, in effect, trying to play God in their life rather than allowing them to be able to deal with some of the natural consequences of life. Not things that are harmful, but just things that we typically learn from as we continue to go through life. But I think that's important to kind of remember. If I put my child in a position where they're more important than anything, more important than everything, my time and my devotion to God, my time and my devotion to other relationships, my time and my devotion to serving Him, to fulfilling the Great Commission, then they are becoming an idol.
Okay. Now, here's the other one that you said that I really wanted to touch on. Political parties. It's really interesting that I've seen people walking around showing flags, specifically during, the time of the election or whatever, flags with, whoever they're voting for or whatever. And I just never understood, how is it that you represent something that much, but there's not an outward experience or outward view of what you see as far as what, your relationship with God. So when it comes to these political parties, I've seen also people who will say this particular party is the Christian party.
Yeah, yeah.
So how does that look as far as idolization and the political parties?
Yeah, it seems as though I think we've entered kind of this, this really unique period of time that's really different, where the idea of following a particular party means that you are a Christian. You can't be a Christian if you follow this party or identify with that party. You can only be a Christian if you're one or the other, which in my opinion really lowers what Christianity is. It lowers Christianity down to a political platform versus Christianity sits above all of those things.
Right.
And sometimes I think we forget that we're ambassadors here, that this is not our homeland, that we're ambassadors at our home. We are citizens of heaven. And so while we have taken on, I think what's happened is we've taken on the identity of those political parties, and we started celebrating so much so that we are putting those platforms above God, or we're trying to make those platforms fit into Christianity, right? So we're trying to say, well, this party does or believes this particular thing, therefore it must be Christianity. Yeah. It may be Christian adjacent, it may be similar to Christianity, but it does not represent the whole of Christianity. And when we start looking at and stripping away the humanity of other people because our political party is in power or our political party we believe is morally correct, then what we begin to do is we're placing it in a position where it is more important than and it is higher than God. And we'll try to say that it's not, but when we tie everything to it,
Yeah.
then we're making that thing more important.
Now, are flags idolization? Like just having a flag, the American flag or your country's flag or whatever. Is that
I don't think having flags are idolization. I think that we can take the idea and the concept of patriotism too far. Again, we are ambassadors. Again, we are citizens of heaven. And so our home is in heaven. Our allegiance is to the King Jesus and King Jesus alone. We can have a fondness, an admiration, and an appreciation for the country we live in. But when we look at the flag or we look at symbols of being a part of this country as part of our overall identity, and we become so focused on that, we can begin to idolize and elevate the ideas of this country above what Christianity really is.
Okay. I did want to bring this up. You know, I'm a part of multiple Greek lettered organizations. And I know you are a part of a Greek lettered organization as well. And unfortunately, we just had the passing of a young man, Caleb Wilson, from a hazing death. And very similar to what had happened when, you know, a lot of people were saying that people were, I guess you want to say, praying to Greek gods and so on and so forth. Now a lot of people are saying, this is what happens when you idolize these Greek lettered organizations. When it comes to Greek lettered organizations, what is too far of crossing the line to where it is idolization? I know for me, that's not the main thing that I lead with when I meet people.
Right.
And so what does that look like when you're now becoming an idol, or it's now an idol in your life?
I think one of the important things when we talk about like this is that if your identity, if this becomes your identity and everything that you see yourself as, the way you relate to other people, you can't relate to other people without bringing this up or making this a part of who you are or expressing yourself in the ways that may be consistent with that particular organization, then I definitely think that's problematic. And I think that becomes an issue. And I know that, you know, when we start talking about things like joining Greek letter organizations, every person's experience can be different than another person's experience based on wherever they actually joined that organization and what happened during that particular time. I don't have any experience personally with any of what people are talking about in terms of things like, you know, praying to Greek gods or doing like that was just not even my experience. As a matter of fact, my experience was directly related to my faith, and that was highly promoted in my own experience, and the ability to be able to serve other people, the ability to be able to serve my community, and also be able to be focused on building bonds with people who are part of the organization.
Which is what the reason for those organizations are.
Exactly.
For anyway. Right.
Exactly. However, on an individual experience, I can't say somebody did or didn't experience something. I can just say I'm not familiar with that. But I think if this becomes the center of who you are, if this becomes the center of your focus, if everything becomes about that particular thing, then that's when we move into a place of it replacing God in your life.
So basically, you heard it here first, all right? So we got to chill out with some of the comments as far as Greek lettered organizations, because people go left and right, and I just be like, what are y'all talking about? Like, just like you said, I never experienced any of those things before. So, hey, all right. How do you identify idols in your life? You know, very similar to what we were talking about as far as social media and just the normal day, the normal habits of your life. You know, some people may be idolizing something and may not realize it. So how do you identify it?
I mean, I think there's a couple of ways. You know, one is what are your priorities? You know, does something have a high level, consistent priority in your life that does not lead you closer to God, does not fulfill whatever your calling or mission is in your relationship with God? Also, what do you sacrifice for? If you find yourself sacrificing more for the things that are not of God versus the things that are really focused on Him, then that potentially could be an indication that it's an idol. Where you invest your time and invest your money. I mean, that's another one. Like if you make a larger investment in your resources. You're using your resources, your gifts, your talents, your tools, whatever they may be, and they're all poured into this particular thing where you have nothing left to be able to offer to offer God or offer his people, then we probably are reaching a point where you need to really evaluate, okay, am I struggling with idolization or idolatry in my life?
So if I'm broke, I'm just using this as a thought process. If I'm broke,
Okay.
and I only have X amount of dollars, if I don't give it to, use it for the kingdom, does that mean that I'm idolizing everything else and not God?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I don't think that means that at all.
Okay.
I do think if you take all of your resources, whatever they may be, great, small, in between, whatever your resources are, time, talents, attention, skills, whatever, and you're pouring them in to everything and you're pouring them into something other than him, then we can begin to look at, is that thing idolatry? Because that's part of making sacrifices, right? I'm making sacrifices for this thing. I'm making sacrifices for this. I'm pouring my energy, I'm pouring my money, I'm pouring my resources into this. And then I have nothing to offer God. Like I literally have nothing to give him, nothing of myself, nothing of my resources, because everything is poured into this. Then that thing has raised to a level of idolatry.
So what about sacrificing sleep, right? So like if I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get up at 3 a.m. and I, go and read my Bible and I pray, that's good, right? But what if I'm like, I don't want to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning because I want to get my rest for work? Does that mean that I now look at sleep as an idol? I want to go through all of it?
I don't think it means you look at sleep as an idol. I do think though, if you look at the entirety of your day and there's no room or no space for God in it anywhere, where you don't have room or space to be able to spend with him, then you probably do need to take a step back and look at, again, that first step is about what am I prioritizing? So I'm prioritizing all and everything else, and God is not a priority at all because I never have any time to spend with him.
So how do you overcome modern day idolatry?
Well, I think you first start off by examining, you examine your life and you begin to question, like, as an ambassador of God, like I like to use that example, as an ambassador of Christ, how am I representing Christ in the world? What am I doing to represent him? If you think about in the United States, for example, we have ambassadors in different countries that represent the country. And each and every day they're going out doing things to represent the interest of the country, doing what's best for the country, doing what's best for its government, carrying out whatever the objectives are for that particular administration. If you think about it in those terms, how do I look at my life? If I look at my life as an ambassador every single day, am I going out carrying out the missions and the objectives of my king? Am I going out and am I representing my king well? Am I going out, am I sharing about my king and what my king has done and who he is and what he's able to accomplish? If I can say there's no part of that where my work as an ambassador is reflecting that, then I can say, okay, well, I need to make some changes because obviously something else is more important in my life.
Well, what if I don't know how to do that, right? Like, what if I'm doing the studying and I'm doing the reading, but I don't know how to go out there and do that or reach somebody or anything like that? Like, I would say, what would be the first step?
I think the first step, obviously, is asking yourself the question, am I living and being obedient to Christ? Because if I'm living in obedience to being Christ, I am being a good ambassador. I'm reflecting him in my relationships. I'm reflecting him in my conversations. I'm reflecting him in the things that I'm actually doing, the way I carry out my work, the way I carry out my life with my family or whatever. And so I don't necessarily have to have a specific assignment apart from all those things. Being an ambassador really touches every part of our life, like everything that I'm doing. So if I'm being obedient to God and I'm living out his word, then I am being an ambassador.
So it's not necessarily you going out like directly saying, this is what I do. Yeah. It's more or less more the actions that you take on a daily basis.
Yes, more the natural actions that you take out of your own relationship with him.
So you guys heard it first, right? So this is what you would do when you deal with idolatry or any of these particular situations, man. So y'all go ahead and apply it to your own lives. I think it is great to be able to apply. And again, this has been Beyond Sunday. Hey, life be lifing. And so now you've gotten a couple of tools to be able to help you and put into your tool bag. We thank you guys, and we'll see you all next time.
Arby's is garbage.
That is getting cut.